This is the new M1 Mac Mini. It costs $699 in the US or $1199 here in New Zealand, making it the most affordable Mac you can buy. Oh, and there's a little thing inside it called the M1 chip. Here's my Mac Mini review. The Mac Mini has always been a bit niche. Its low price point means it's always been one of the more affordable devices Apple sells, but you just get the box and the power lead, meaning you need a screen, a keyboard and a mouse to make this thing work, and that obviously bumps up the price. There's a speaker inside this Mini somewhere, but it's hilarious. Check out this sound quality, it's the most un-Apple thing ever.
Matt Wilkinson.
Apple Music 1.
Hey, I am playing you nothing but heroes today. No villains on this show.
Apart from having fewer ports and a crap speaker, the Mac Mini is fantastic. It's replaced my MacBook Pro as my go-to work computer, and this was unexpected for me as I've chosen to work with a laptop for the best part of a decade. This was a habit I forged when I used to work in London and caught the tube to work every day. Back then, I needed a computer that I could take with me wherever I went. Now, with more of us working from home, I think there's more of a market for desktop PCs again. The entry-level Mac Mini comes with 8GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. It's the most affordable option. Apple sent me the 16GB of RAM and 1TB of storage unit, which costs $2,249 here in New Zealand, and it glides. I've thrown everything I can at this Mac. Photoshop, Final Cut Pro, and had a million tabs open in Chrome, and it handles it without a bother. The only time it's a bit slow is when you wake the Mac up from its sleep, and then it's only a few seconds. That's it. A lot of people have been asking questions about why Apple's given its Macs such a small amount of RAM. The answer is because it's moved to a unified RAM system. Apple is playing a different game with RAM to the rest of the computer industry. It has been for years. Its iPhones have always had a modest amount of RAM compared to its Android rivals. The new M1 Macs are doing the same, coming with only 8GB of RAM as standard, with Apple only allowing configurations up to 16GB in total, which is tiny compared to the rest of the computing industry. The 16-inch MacBook Pro that Apple released in 2019 could be configured to up to 64GB of RAM. That was the Intel-based Macs. The new Macs are different. The M1 is the ultimate system on a chip. The M1 houses the Mac's CPU, GPU and RAM all on the same chip. And the advantages of keeping everything on the same chip, Apple tells us, is that it can run a lot faster because it's not transferring data via cables between different components. If you're not a dedicated follower of technology, you may have missed the hype that came with the launch of the M1 chip inside of this Mac Mini. M1 is what Apple is calling its new ARM-based chip, and M1 is replacing Intel inside of Macs, which is huge news, as Apple has partnered with Intel for its Macs for 15 years. While it's huge news, it's not surprising news. Apple has been making its own ARM-based chips for its iPhones and iPads for years now, and Apple's iPhones and iPads, with its chips inside them, have outperformed the competition regarding processing performance and battery life for just as long. The M1 is the traditional computing equivalent. I'll come to benchmark scores in a minute, but it's important to note that I've been organically pushing this Mac Mini as hard as I can. Okay, benchmarks. The M1 Mac Mini single-core Geekbench 5 score is about 10% higher than other Macs, and that's when running the benchmark software through Rosetta 2. The multi-core scores were just as impressive, with only the MacBook Pro beating its scores. One of the main benefits the M1 chip brings is improved performance per watt, which has a big impact on battery life for the MacBook, but it isn't a thing for the Mac Mini as it's a desktop PC, and it uses the same 150-watt power supply as its Intel predecessor. It is 60% more efficient than Intel though. Another question a lot of people have been asking is how well does the M1 Mac run Intel apps? Very. And Rosetta 2 is the answer. Rosetta 2 is a piece of translation software that Apple uses to let the M1 Macs run apps designed for Intel's architecture. When you first try and run an Intel-designed Mac app, your new Mac will pop up a window prompting you to install Rosetta 2 in order to run the Intel app. 5 seconds later, Rosetta 2 is installed, and those 5 seconds are the only difference you'll notice. That's it. There are no real perceivable performance issues running old Intel apps on the new M1 Macs. You can now run iOS and iPad apps on the Mac too, sort of. App developers have to make their iOS and iPadOS apps available for the M1 Macs first. And Facebook for iPad is the most well-known app I've found, which is pretty redundant as Facebook is already optimized for web browsers, and the Mac is pretty well served in that department. You can't make your iOS and iPadOS apps full screen on the Mac though, which is a bit of a pain, and I don't know why they've done that. There's never been a huge amount going on with the Mac Mini's design. It's always been a small box with an Apple logo and a smattering of ports on the rear. This is the same, but with fewer ports than before. The Mac Mini now only has 2 USB-C Thunderbolt ports, down from 4, and 2 USB-A ports. I'm not sure how to feel about this. There hasn't been a single time in the past 2 years when I've needed to use more than 2 USB ports at once, so it doesn't really affect my work. Plus, you can daisy-chain Thunderbolt port devices forever, but 2 USB-C ports does feel a little bit low. Another difference is the return to silver from space grey from the 2018 Mac Mini, which, who cares? Okay, here's my verdict. It's impossible not to love the new M1 Mac Mini. It's a device that's always occupied a slightly niche place in the market, but now it has the excellent M1 chip. This means speed, efficiency, and future-proofing. COVID-19 has forced more of us to create a dedicated space in our home where we can work. The Mac Mini is a product that I think a lot of people will find attractive, rather than folding their necks and arms into a laptop from home, like I do. Like I said before, it's the most affordable Mac, and if you're okay using a desktop PC for your main computer, it's a really, really good option. We're going to have more tech reviews coming, so don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications bell.